Let's get into this. Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to do my weekly wrap up for the week of July the 3rd to July the 8th, which is one day shorter than I would normally do because last week I included the Sunday because of reasons. This week I read a total of 8 books that included 4 graphic novel trades, 1 short story, 1 tome, and 2 ebooks, one of which was an ARC. Lots of reading going on, but I am on holidays, so I do have a little bit of extra time. Altogether that was a total of 2,081 pages, and I think I'm up to 136 books for the year. So, excellent. The first book that I read, well, graphic novel that I read this week was the DC Universe Rebirth Batgirl Volume 1, Beyond Burnside, where Barbara's decided to go on a bit of a road trip and ends up finding an old friend, and there's a little bit of mystery, a little bit of romance, a little bit of double crossing, and ultimately I found this one to be really disappointing, and that irritates me because I love Batgirl and I will read all of her stories, but this one just fell a little bit flat. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think I was probably being a little bit generous, but I just wish there'd been more. Next, I read the DC Universe Rebirth Nightwing, Volume 1, Better Than Batman. This one I enjoyed a lot more, which is not surprising because I do enjoy the Nightwing comics as well, but this one I think the story was just a little bit more well-rounded than in Beyond Burnside, and I really enjoy the character of Dick Grayson. I think he's hilarious, and he does some stupid things sometimes, but ultimately he pulls through and you know that he's a good guy. So this one sees Dick as he is returning back to Gotham and trying to find his own place now that he's returned from his gig as a spy, and how he's trying to carve out his place and reclaim the Nightwing. Ultimately, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. Then I read Kindred Spirits by Rainbow Rowell, which is a short story, and I really loved this. This was gorgeous and sweet. It is about Elena, who is a hardcore Star Wars fan, and she decides to camp outside the theatre before The Force Awakens for 4 days. The only problem is the line is 3 people long, and it is the gorgeous story of how these 3 strangers get to know each other and bond over their love of Star Wars. You know, it was just so cute. Elena's a teenager, and I loved how her mother is quite concerned by the fact that her daughter has decided to sleep on the street while waiting for a movie for 4 days. She comes by and she checks on her, but she's not overbearing. She just wants to make sure that her daughter's safe. I love the interactions between the 3 characters, and I loved the ending. I burst out laughing and I thought it was hilarious. Very short read, well worth it if you're a Star Wars fan or a Rainbow Rowell fan. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read DC Universe Rebirth Wonder Woman Volume 2 Year 1. I believe I said in my Comic-Con wrap-up that I picked this one up because Nicola Scott was the artist on this issue, and after listening to her talk about Wonder Woman I really wanted to read something that she had illustrated, and this one had gotten pretty good reviews, and I really love this. I love Year 1 stories in the DC Universe. I love getting the origin, and this was just a really nice contemporary take. It's the first Wonder Woman graphic novel I've read, so it was interesting to see how it compared to the film, and there were similarities but there were also not. And what I really loved about this particular issue, I realised while reading it, was that a lot of the things that Nicola Scott had talked about during her Comic-Con panel were things that happened in this particular trade, so I had a little bit of backstory, which was really, really cool. There's a really sweet storyline as Diana is learning to communicate with these humans who she's never had any interaction with, which wasn't a problem in the film, but it was in this one, and I really liked how that was an issue that had to be overcome. So I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Really enjoyed this intro into Wonder Woman comics. The next book I read was an e-arc that I picked up from NetGalley, and that was Omega, which is the second book in the Infinity Division series by Jazzacado. I really liked the first book, and perhaps that might have been because when I read it I hadn't read a whole lot of time traveling or alternate universe traveling books, but reading this one it was still good and I still enjoyed it, but having started the Firebird series by Claudia Gray, this fell really flat for me. I don't know whether because the focus was really, really heavily on the 2 main characters in the story, who were Noah and Ash, and really it just felt like their relationship journey as opposed to a science fiction time traveling novel, because it's sort of that bridge between young adult and new adult because the characters are just a little bit older. We didn't get to see the perspectives of all of the main characters. The original premise of the story is that the technology to travel between alternate universes has been discovered, and in one particular universe, one character has killed someone for the technology and then skipped their universe and travelled into another one. And two of the main characters, Noah and Cade, travel between alternate universes trying to track down Dylan. On the way they run into Corey, and we discovered that there is a relationship between Corey and Noah and Cade, but it takes the whole of the first book to uncover exactly what that story and what that connection is. This second book picks up where the last one left off. Dylan is still jumping between different universes and worlds, and these three are following them, except this time Noah breaks off and goes in pursuit of Ashlyn, who is a character that pops up in his timeline and his history in multiple worlds, and he decides to uncover what's going on. The world that they're in is quite dystopian and quite bizarre. It's a world that is ruled by the mob. There's a very strict tier system, which is sort of like your socioeconomic status, but literally depending on the tier that you're in, your whole life is determined for you. So there's a lot of interesting things going on, but because of the way the story really just focused on what was going on between Noah and Ash, I think, yeah, the plot got a little bit lost. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars because it was still an interesting story and I still like the characters, but I just wish there'd been something more because it was the second book in a series. Then I read DC Universe Rebirth Batgirl and the Birds of Prey, Volume 1, Who is Oracle? This one I really enjoyed. I love the Birds of Prey. It's probably one of my favourite series to follow because I love the interplay between Barbara, Helena and Dinah, and I just think the Birds of Prey are awesome. This almost got 5 stars from me, but it fell flat because of who Oracle actually is at the end, and I'm not going to say anything because that would be spoilers. To me, it just undermines who and what the Birds of Prey stood for, and I'm not going to say too much about it. All I'll say is I really love this. I love how it tied in a bit of an origin story of Helena as Huntress, and you got some backstory on these two characters, and I haven't stayed up to date with all of DC's releases. So I started off New 52, but I didn't finish New 52. So this sort of plugged a few gaps for me, which was really nice. The Birds of Prey always have a really interesting dynamic, particularly Helena and Barbara, because they come from very different approaches to being vigilante superheroes, and it was really nice to see that addressed in this. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was At Any Price, which is the first book in the Gaming the System series by Brenna Aubrey. It is a new adult series, and I read this because it is the Vaginal Fantasy Book Club book of the month for July, and that book club is a Goodreads group that was created by Felicia Day and a whole bunch of other really awesome ladies, so I'll leave a link to that down below. I read this one because it was a free ebook for this month, and if it's still free, I will leave a link to it in the comments down below if you would like to check it out. Ultimately, it follows the story of Mia, who is a gamer and blogger, and she has decided that at the age of 22, she's going to sell off her virginity to pay for her medical school costs. And she has a whole list of reasons why she wants to do it. She's listed them in her Virgin Manifesto on her blog. Honestly, the summary was a little bit concerning for me. However, I decided to read it and just see what it's about, because with everything that I've been reading this week, I wanted to read something new adult and just fun and silly and smutty, and you know, it's all of those things. Mia auctions this off online, and I mean, there's a lot of detail that goes into saying why it's technically legal because it's not, yeah, all that sort of stuff. Like that, to me, I could have done without that because it's like movie magic. You can have book magic with really silly plots. The highest bidder turns out to be Adam Drake, who is a software designer, and he actually designed one of her favorite online games to play. Obviously, both of these characters have hidden baggage because they're people, and that aspect I really like because you can see where the conflict comes into play. Mia has really strict stipulations on the auction in that it's a one night only thing, and once it's done, the two parties are never to have any further contact, and of course that just goes completely by the wayside, and you can see how both characters begin to fall for one another, but for very different reasons. What I will say, there were a few twists that I saw coming from about chapter 3. While it didn't detract from enjoying the story at a, at a basic level. It sort of just was one of those things where like, well, okay, when is this reveal going to happen? Because we've basically figured it out already, so let's just get it done. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't a terrible read, it wasn't a great read either, but it was just something that was fun and enjoyable. The last book that I read this week was Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first Brandon Sanderson book that I have read, and while I was initially hesitant to go into it, and while it took me a while to get into it because high fantasy, lots of characters, lots of plot lines, lots of heavy world building, which I don't always do very well with, I ultimately love this. And in contrast to At Any Price, this book had plot twists that I did not see coming, and most of them happened in the last 200 pages and left me sitting there going, what the hell just happened? For those of you who aren't familiar with this series, this book is about 2 sisters, Ciri and Vivenna, who find themselves in a foreign kingdom, one of whom has been sent to marry the god king of that kingdom, and the other who was raised to be the one to be sent to the god king but was chosen to stay behind, and she goes off to try and save her sister. The kingdom of Hallandren is ruled by the god king and the returned gods, who are people who died and then returned with these powers. The magic system in here is really awesome and really unique, and I don't know how Brandon Sanderson came up with it, because it is tied to people's soul, and people's souls are represented by this breath. And people can collect extra breaths, but they can also expend their breaths to perform different types of magic. They can also call on colour as a form of magic as well. All of the characters in here were really awesome and interesting. My particular favourites were Ciri Lightsong, who is a lesser god, and also Vasha, who is a mysterious mercenary that we meet throughout the story, and he has a talking sword, which was just hilarious. Ultimately, I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I don't know if I'm going to continue with Brandon Sanderson's other works, only because, yeah, high fantasy and it makes me nervous, and I don't like getting into a big, huge series with huge, chunky books anymore. It's just, I can't do it, and because I had this on my shelf, I wanted to read it. Apparently there is a second book coming out at some point. Maybe I'll read it, maybe I won't, but I really enjoyed this on its own, and I really, really appreciated the writing style in this. And yeah, if you haven't tried his work, it's not a bad one to start off with, in my opinion, but I haven't read any other ones, so don't quote me on that. So if you can imagine another 2 books about yay thick on top of there, that's what I read this week. As always, I will leave links to all of these books on Goodreads down below so that you can check out the summaries if you want more information, because quite often some of my summaries just get really rambly, and I apologise for that, but you know, that's how I am. In the comments, let me know what you have been reading this week. I would love to know. Stay tuned later this week because I have a tag video, and I also have a video of me defacing my hardcover edition of A Court of Mist and Fury, which I am both nervous and excited about showing you guys, but I really loved how it turned out, so I can't wait to show you. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching. See you later, guys.